Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Maybe you know me as the Wandering Scribe or the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is an author making their official debut here on the channel. Now, after graduating from, I'm going to butcher this name, I apologize in advance, Loyola Marymount University with a BA in Technical Theater, my guest spent over 15 years in film and television production, starting out as a film set assistant on movies such as Independence Day, Face Off, Primal Fear, and EVITA. She eventually switched to the small screen and worked her way up the ladder to production manager, gaining experiences on television shows such as Big Brother, Adoption Stories, Extra Yardage, and Meet the Pandas. She is also a proud member of the Producers Guild of America, and her colorful experiences in the industry inspired her to write The Rise and Fall of DANI TRUEHART series, which has won over 27 awards since it was published. She lives in San Clemente, California with her husband, their son, and their disobedient dachshund. And so that way you all can know the series itself, she was more than happy to send me the entire trilogy, which I will be covering in future episodes in their own Wandering Scribe book impressions episodes. So, without further ado, viewers and listeners, let us give a huge round of applause to a fellow California author, Michele, bear with me, everybody, Kwasniewski. I probably butchered that, but all in all, Michele, welcome to the show.
That is an outstanding introduction, Gabriel. Thank you so much. And you actually pronounced it in the Polish way, which is Kwasniewski. So you're right on brand. But if you're American or, you don't speak Polish, it's Kwasniewski. But I answered to both. So thank you for having me on the show. That was a great introduction.
Thank you, Michele. I am so excited to have you here. And I am really, really excited to dive into your series. Now, before we dive in to the creation of this trilogy, let's start off with a little icebreaker question. Now, from your bio, you have worked in the realm of TV and cinema for a very, very long time. Now, I'm very curious. Is there a random fact besides working in film and television and on these incredible productions that not a lot of people may know about you?
So when I graduated from college, I didn't, you're first out of a college job, you don't make a lot of money. I was stage managing a show in Hollywood. I made $300 for 3 months' work. So my other two jobs, because I had to have 3 jobs in order to pay rent to live on a sofa, was Cheesecake Factory, working in the bakery. So I got to sling cheesecake. And I'm very proud to say hot dog on a stick, which landed me a job at a huge company because the person interviewing me, who was the executive in charge of production, had also worked at hot dog on a stick in high school. So that is my little known fact.
Nice. Well, it's also nice to meet another food servicers worker, because a little random fact about me, I also worked in food services in college.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so
it's a good job to have. It teaches you a lot.
It does. And my parents also worked in hospitality as well. They have a lot of experience in the hospitality business when they were my age, if not a little bit older. So funny thing how it comes like a little full circle.
It is. And again, I never thought that hot dog on a stick would have landed me a job in entertainment, but it did. So you never know. You're always networking.
Absolutely, Michele. Absolutely. Now, for those that are now meeting you for the very first time, without revealing too much, what can people expect of your trilogy, The Rise and Fall of DANI TRUEHART?
So The Rise and Fall of DANI TRUEHART is, each book is written as a standalone. So the first book is Rising Star, the second book is Burning Bright, and the third book is Falling Star. So you could start your journey anywhere in DANI's career. It's told in a very short timeline, between 15 to 17 years old, and it basically explores the shadows that the spotlight casts on this young teenage pop star as she goes from a relatively unknown singer to the pinnacle of fame in pop stardom, and how it affects not only herself and her development into adulthood, but her family and friends. And a lot of times people don't realize that it's not just the star that is experiencing all of these great things and sometimes not great things, but it affects their family and friends as well. So we see how it affects her whole inner circle and the choices that she makes as she becomes an adult.
Nice. All right. All right. So let's actually now talk about you as an author from that, transition from the world of film and media into the world of publishing. So walk us through it. How did that journey begin? And do you have a definitive aha moment that really put you on this path that made you think of, yeah, I think I can write my own story. I think I've been around a lot of story creatives in the film industry that I think I know like how to make my own story.
Well, I had worked on a couple different TV show pitches that I tried to pitch at my company, and I always listened, but nothing was quite right. But I worked those up with a friend of mine, so we kind of co-wrote those together. And then once I got pregnant, I had to stop working because my hours were too long. It was affecting the pregnancy. So I stopped working, and we decided that I wouldn't go back because my job, my short day was like an 8-hour day. My long days were usually, my longest day I worked on, that was on set, was 21 hours. So it was a lot of work. And so when I worked in the office, it was an average of 12 hours a day, just a regular day, because I have people out on shoots, I have people wrapping up shoots, I have people starting shoots, and I'm managing all of it because that's what I handle, the budgets, hired the crews, booked the equipment. So it was a lot to handle. So once we had our baby and I'm stuck at home, and after a while, the babies are pretty much, they nap and sleep. And I found I had a lot more time on my hands than I was accustomed to. And a friend that I used to write my show pitches with, hi, Jimmy, he suggested, why don't you start writing again? Why don't you just write something? And he thought maybe a script or whatever, and I wasn't really comfortable with that. So I tried to think about what I could write without doing a lot of research, because babies and libraries don't mix. So,
right.
Because this is, again, way back when I started writing this like 15 years ago. So like the internet was happening, but really when I had to do big research projects, I still would go to a library. And so I started figuring out what I could do. Well, you know what? I know a lot about entertainment, and I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, you know what? At the time, I think Britney Spears was just trying to go through her struggles. Like a lot of the young TV stars and movie stars they were all out there having some issues at the clubs. And I thought, why don't I write something about that? How fame affects a young person. And then that's where the genesis of the story came. And I had seen a lot of things, and also just not about teenagers in my career, but also adults too. Whether you're behind the camera or in front of the camera, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of money to be had. There's a lot of fame. And it really is, you have to make sure that you have your grasp on your moral compass, or before you might start crossing lines that you don't intend to cross in order to get that next job or to maintain your job. So, and I thought it'd be an interesting twist to put that on a teenager.
That is actually really interesting. And you know what? It's not so much as what I think a lot of people are going to really take away from this trilogy. It's not so much, a really good fiction trilogy, but it's also, one could argue, an examination into a little bit of the music industry, pop culture, and just, fame, and just trying to, balance, as you said, who you are before you became famous with, the temptations of what fame brings. So I guess you could also say it's also, in a way, a commentary of a little bit of the music industry, in the sense of, what fame can possibly do to young people in the industry, regardless if it's, the music industry or the film industry.
Absolutely. And I will say, I said it in music just because I didn't want to get sued by anyone I knew. I did not base the only character in my entire trilogy based on an actual person is Martin, who is based on my best friend from college, Daniel. And he wasn't a pop star, but he just had that exuberant personality, and he was just so funny. And so that's who my inspiration was for Martin. Everyone else is completely made up. So I wanted to be clear that I was not writing about people I'd work with, because when people see my bio, they might think, oh, she worked with this famous producer or this famous actor. And I didn't want to get sued or be disparaging about anyone I had met. So that's why I specifically said in an industry I did not work in. But you're right, they're all really the same. And I'm going to even include social media, because becoming famous now just takes a viral video. And you could be doing like drinking a soda pop and having it snort through your nose, and all of a sudden you're like, thousands of people or millions of people know who you are. So, and I think that that challenge of you getting in the spotlight, because people are always trying to get in the spotlight. So how do you make yourself unique and stand out from a world of people trying to do the same thing? Then once you're in the spotlight, you have to keep pushing the envelope to keep your audience's attention. So you're not even producing content or doing something notable every single day, but sometimes if you're posting it on social media, it's like every hour, every, 2 or 3 times a day. So it's a lot of pressure. And then you're living this normal life with your family and friends who are not in that world. And just it all kind of is what you're going to do and who you are is really reflected in the choices you make. And when you're a teenager, you don't have the experience that an adult has. And you might not even have a good parent or teacher guiding you. And that's kind of Dani's case. She doesn't really have any strong parental influence until her guardian steps up.
Interesting. All right. So now let's actually dive deep into the creation of the trilogy, beginning with the first book in the series. So as you were writing this out, as you said, child had just been born, you're taking a step back from, working a little bit, your friend kind of gives you the push to write this story. So how did the overall name of the first book come about? And from that, did that birth the series title, or did the series title birth the first title in the book?
I definitely had the series title first, because this was all supposed to be one book.
Oh,
believe it or not, that was from someone who had never written a book before. And I was like, oh, it's going to be this, the dramatic rise and fall. And you don't know what the rise and fall means. Like, it could mean several different things. And that's kind of what I loved about that. Like, what is it going to be? And I had a couple, because I don't outline. So right. I had 2 different ways the book could end. And I knew I was going to figure it out as I wrote it. And as I was writing it, I was like, oh, this is going to be like War and Peace length if I don't chop it up. And then I was trying to see, well, how could I come up with 3 related book titles? So that took a little bit of time. The Rising Star, the Burning Bright, the Falling Star. Because Rising Star, she lands her contract in that book. Her career begins. Burning Bright, her career really pops and she goes on a world tour. And then Falling Star, she's dealing with the repercussions she's been making from the stress and the fame that she's experienced in the first 2 books. And then she kind of has to decide who she is as a pop star and as a young woman.
Nice. Okay. Now, you just said that you don't typically do outlines, but I imagine you must have had like some kind of general idea of what the first book was going to be about, the second book, and ultimately the third book. Now, with that said, how are you able to sort of like manage and balance all 3 of those separate stories, but they tell one overarching story, while also, balancing, your personal life as well? Because being an author, as well as also being a parent, is a lot of things to do to manage everything. It can be, I imagine, very stressful at some times.
It can be, and that's why the first book took 7 years. And it kind of goes back to the one of the questions you answered, I briefly touched on. So I had not decided to actually be a writer probably until 5 years into this book. And that's why it took so long, because I would write in snatches when our son was sleeping, or when like he was with his grandparents. I had the house to myself for a little bit. So I didn't get a lot of everyday steady time, weeks on end to write. And it would come in snatches. And I had sent like the first couple chapters to the friend who had suggested I write, and he loved it and gave you some, advice. And so then but it was just the time management for me. And I was dealing with that. Well, who am I? Who's going to want to read what I write? I wasn't even thinking of selling it or getting an agent. I was like, who's going to read this?
Right.
But my sister-in-law had actually said one day at Christmas, she's like, because she asked me how my book was. I'm like, oh, it's okay. And she's like, look, you're either going to write it or not write it. You have time to write. You're not making time to write. And I was like, it was just a brilliant, like inspiration. Because I wasn't making time to write. So I thought about it and talked to my husband, like, look, you know what? I want to finish this book. Let's just see if I can finish it. So I started treating it like a job. I started showing up every single day for a couple of hours, and ranged around nap times. So I wasn't missing time with my son. And I knocked that book out within like a year and a half. And then I was like, well, it's done. Maybe I'll see if I can find an agent. So that's kind of how my career began. And then when the agent, let's see if she can sell it. And she did. So that whole series, that's how that series began. And then once the series ended, I knew I wanted to keep writing. And I had something, a TV show idea that I'd pitched way back when that got a little bit of interest but didn't go anywhere. So that's the current series, My Agent is Shopping. We'll get to that in a bit. But so yeah, so it was more, it was for me a confidence issue, not believing that I had a story to tell, not believing that anyone would read it, or then an agent would represent me, or then someone would pay to publish it. I mean, because they're not paying me, they're covering all the costs. And to me,
Right.
that's a paycheck. So it was, all of those things were things, it took me a long time to work up to believe that I could do that.
Yes.
And through the help of my beta readers and getting advice from people and feedback from readers that I trusted, I was able to move forward and gain that confidence to keep trying.
Absolutely, Michelle. Absolutely. And just looking at book 1, Rising Star, I'm very, very curious. As you were planning, the initial draft of Rising Star, ultimately, what was the goal you had for yourself working on the first book before, building upon it with 2 and 3 that you had for yourself as the author, but also the promise you're making, not just to yourself, but also your future readers who might be interested?
Well, again, I didn't realize until almost halfway through Rising Star that it was going to be a single book. I still thought it was going to be an overarching story, and I realized that wasn't going to work. So then I had to figure out where am I going to cut that story off, and what impact is that book going to have, both for itself to be read as a standalone, and then overall, where is it going to fit in this trilogy? So I had to kind of take a couple weeks to change my mindset about what the concept was of the series, because I had envisioned it as one book. So I really wanted to give the reader what you're stepping into, like as a career, just like a new writer. No, you don't know what you're stepping into, right? So
Right.
I had done research again on the recording business and the music business, because that wasn't my forte. I was in movies and television. But there are certain things like contracts, and certain things are very similar. So I had some basic knowledge, but then I had to do a deep dive into recording booths and mics and how royalties work for music and everything else too, which was very educational and interesting. And basically then around all those factors, filling in Dani's story. Like I had the facts, like the bones that I needed, and then trying to fill in Dani's story. And she is this overbearing stage mom who is, they're constantly at odds, but Dani still believes like her mother always has her best interest at heart and doesn't realize how greedy her mom is. She has her, her agent and her agent and her guardian, who are, they both have their own interests, as well as the guardian more than the agent, trying to protect her while launching her career forward. And in the first book, she's not even committed to being a pop star. It's just that she's only known because her mom has really pushed her into singing and taking dance lessons, everything. And so she barely goes to school. She competes in pageants. She's always going to lessons and whatnot. So she has not had a normal childhood. So this is all she's known. And right before she goes for her big audition, she's wondering if this is really what she wants to do with her life. So that was my whole goal, was to give the reader the idea of what you're committing to, because everyone's like, oh, recording contract, you get an acting contract. It sounds phenomenal. But a lot of people don't realize all of the work, like you're traveling. When I was working on movies, I had worked a 21-hour day. It's really hard to call home or see your family or whatever when you're working those hours. It's very insular. So I was really trying to build that. I mean, with one of the things is she has to move out of her house and go move into the compound with her agent and guardian to record. So I was trying to show how isolating it can be for especially a teenager, but for anyone, when you're thrust into this world and you're plucked out of like your school, your job, your family.
Absolutely, Michelle. Absolutely. So now let's actually dive into some of our beginning fan questions that I've been getting. So one of my viewers would like to know, when creating Dani TRUEHART, how did you make her feel authentic, in the sense that it makes sense for her to exist in the world and not be a caricature of a real person or of herself?
Well, and I did feel it was very important. One of the questions I get asked a lot is this a fictional Britney Spears? It's absolutely not. I wanted to make her her own person. And I wanted to also, like, she grapples with stage fright, because then you'd think pop star performing in front of hundreds of thousands of people, that is a very real thing for some people. And even if you're super famous, there are some actors and pop singers or singers who do have that right before they go on, they feel nauseous. There's like a vomit bucket or whatever. And it's just getting on stage. It's very, very scary to step onto stage. But once they're on stage, everything kicks in and they thrive off the energy, right? Doing little things like I thought about what she likes. Does she drink coffee? Does she drink tea? Like, what's her favorite TV show? So that I built all these little personality quirks and traits, which some don't even enter the book. But as an author, I like to do that. And I don't always write it down. Sometimes it's just in my head. Sometimes I do like a vision board, like with pictures, like for character sheets. But I really like to get to know the person and build a little bit of their personality, so I know kind of where they're coming from before we step into the story of the book. So she's not fully flat. Like, her story doesn't start on page 1, but her story has actually started because she's had a whole childhood where she hasn't been able to go to birthday parties. She wasn't allowed to eat chocolate or sugar because she always had to be small, and she had to be clear skin, and all of these different things that her mom did to control her. And and she's just innocently gone along because she thought, well, why wouldn't my mom have my best interest at heart? And she didn't realize there was another way to be parented. So it's all those little choices that I make before I start the story. And I do it kind of not fully conscious, but I ask myself little questions: what they like, would she like this? What does she do in her free time? Like, she's not a big reader because she never really learned to love reading. So it's that kind of thing. So that's how I try to make her as realistic as possible. And all my characters, I try to find out who they are outside of the story. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Now, kind of going forward with that, another fan question is, and this may kind of border on spoiler, so just let you know, you can give as much or as little for these next 2 questions. My other viewers would like to know, out of all of the characters and favorite scenes and moments, who was your favorite character to write, and what was your favorite scene to fully flesh out?
Okay, my favorite character to write in this series was Jody TRUEHART, Dani's mom. And because she is the one who readers have gotten back to me about the most. Everyone hates Jody, and because they imagine like having Jody as a mom. She's very self-serving. She's very abrupt. She doesn't have really a kind word to say throughout most of the series. But it wasn't just about that. I wanted to delve into, so I had this whole backstory that actually got pulled out of the book because when I was querying for an agent, I had this great agent that kept talking to me but kept rejecting me. But she was giving me a roadmap to what she thought would be a sellable book. And then she'd ask me to send it back, and I'd make the changes, send it back, and then she would change it again. So one of the things was, she said, you have to pull out all the adult backstory and narrative because it's not working, because teens want to hear about what the teen is going through, not the adults. They don't really care. They want the teen. So, but that being said, even though it was pulled out, a lot of those bits and pieces are still there underneath in the layers of Jody. And my favorite scene that I wrote with Jody is she and Dani have an epic fight when Dani's on tour in book 2. And it is just like, you would never want your parent to say any of the things that Jody was saying to Dani. And it was Dani's first time for really vocalizing her anger at her mom and really questioning her mom, which she's never done before. And I think all of us at some point when we're a teenager have had that moment with our parents where you're hot and cold and you're sweating, but you know you need to say it or else you really just, you feel like you're going to explode. And so writing that, it was very emotional. And I'm glad that it came across on the page because people said, everyone who read Burning Bright had a really, really strong feelings about that fight and had a lot of questions about Dani, and most people absolutely, not Dani, about Jody, and most people absolutely can't stand her. So, and I love that I wrote someone that has such a visceral reaction for my readers.
All right. Now the follow-up to that, the part 2, focuses also on some characters that we as authors struggle with, because there is always 1 or 2 characters that people love, but don't know that bringing them to life or fleshing them out as best we can have been a struggle, as well as some chapters or scenes. They're always going to be constantly rewritten, constantly changed. So now the flip side, which character throughout the trilogy was probably the most difficult to bring to life, and what scene throughout all 3 books was the most challenging to write?
That's a very good question. And I'm going to say it's Jody's counterpart, her husband, because he was the type of husband and father who just was so in love with his wife, just let her run the show, right? And they're just kind of an absent parent. He went to work. He was so proud of his kids, but really because Jody was such a spark plug, he just let her have the run of things. And it wasn't until things start falling apart in book 2, in certain senses, and in book 3 that he realizes like he really kind of failed as a parent and as a husband by letting Jody run roughshod over the whole family. And the hardest thing I want to say it was in book 2 at the end, or it might have been the beginning of book 3, where he and Danny have a heart to heart, where he's talking about how he failed her as a parent and kind of explaining his point of view, like, this is why I did what I did, and it's not an excuse, but this is because it is one of those things. He's very absent in most of the series. You hear about him every once in a while, but he's really absent, and that's kind of what his role is. He's the absent parent. And had he stepped up, would Danny have the career that she has if he would have said, she has to go to school. She can't be on a diet at 13, like those kind of things. And I think that because it's very much she didn't get to be a star on her own. Every single person in her life either pushed her forward or tried to hold her back. And I think it's that push and pull that affects all the relationships throughout the series. And at the end, you're kind of seeing where they land at the end of the series. So that conversation was really, really hard because I didn't want it to seem like he didn't love his child, but sometimes you don't think about things, and he just didn't know that he needed to do more.
Fascinating. Really, really good. Really, really interesting to hear. So now kind of jumping ahead. So after, all the books were in their drafting phases and going on to publication, at what point in your journey, Michele, did you take ownership of the title of being an author? And the reason I bring this up is that from a lot of the guests that I've had on the show thus far, there's been this apprehensiveness and hesitancy to let people know that we are authors, we are storytellers. There's been this weariness to let people know. And I find that very, very interesting. More so interesting of when people who have been on the show have told me when they've told their inner circle, whether it's their family, their friends, or a good group of people, that they've embarked on this journey. They've either told them at the very get-go and have been very supportive. Others have told their friends and family when a book had been published. And in some instances, they are completely oblivious. They have not been told. So for you, Michele, in your journey, when did you not only claim the title of being an author, but you also felt comfortable sharing it with others?
So it's very funny you say that, because for the first 5 years, I didn't tell anyone I was writing. My husband didn't even really know I was writing something. He knew I was working on something on my computer, but I felt very self-conscious. I think like a lot of your other listeners and guests, I felt very self-conscious. Again, who am I to write something? Who's going to read it? I have atrocious grammar, always have. I can't use a comma to save my life. So that was something that really, it kept me from writing for far too long. But that's what editors are for. You don't need to be good at grammar. So it wasn't until my sister-in-law had posed that question, you either are going to write or you're not going to write. You don't have time, make the time. So once I did that, so I told my husband first, and then I would kind of told my sister, my mom, my grandma, but very few people knew. But once I finished the book, then I told people, oh, I finished a book. And then I think I'm going to try and get something, but I was still kind of quiet about it. And occasionally people would ask, and I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't tell people, was people would ask, and then you feel self-conscious, like it's a burden, like people are expecting. And you know what it's like trying to get published or trying to write a book. It's not like a daily update sometimes. Sometimes it's weeks or months. So that pressure was one of the reasons why I avoided to tell people. But then I used that as a motivation to keep going. And sometimes you say, I don't have an update yet. I'll tell you when I do. Or, and sometimes I had to ask a couple of people to stop asking because they were asking a lot. And then when I got an agent, again, that was another, I would tell people, oh, I got an agent. So I'd give them updates like that, and that made my confidence grow. But I still referred to myself as a writer. And I think it wasn't until I landed a publishing contract that I was like, I'm going to be an author. And I don't know why I had that separation in my head, but I felt like I liked having an actual physical book or like a written book. I felt like that was like what made me an author, but that's not. I think if you put a pen to page, you put pen or you put words on a page, I think you're an author then. That was just my own little like quirk in my head. I don't feel that way now, but for some reason, I think because it was something that I had made so big in my head, I didn't feel comfortable giving myself that title until I'd gotten my first contract.
Absolutely, Michelle. And it's actually funny that you brought up this notion of writers and authors, because I actually was talking with a few friends of mine about this, and I was very fascinated by this discussion of, what really classifies someone as a writer as opposed to being an author. Are you an author if you only have something that's published? Or are you still an author if you've written numerous stories but have not published anything? I've had a lot of guests on the show who have written countless other bodies of work. One guest who's based in New York has a storage locker filled with so much material, but those are unpublished. He said that he will never publish those works, and he's only known for one published work. And I find this very, very interesting, this discussion of, what is classified, or who would classify as a writer, who is classified as an author. And why do you think there is this discussion, Michelle? In your opinion, do you think there is a difference between the two, and that only when something is published is someone considered or deemed an author?
Well, and it's very interesting because my answer has changed, because before I had gotten published, I would have said there was a difference. But now that I'm published, I think it's the same thing as being traditionally published or being like indie published, self-published. I think they're all the same. I think when you write something, whether you're currently writing it in the active process of writing it or you're finished writing it, you're an author. I think that makes you an author. Because like I've written 5 books. I have 2 that my agent is, working on trying to sell. It doesn't mean I didn't write the books just because they're not published. So I think that the more experience I've gotten, I feel more comfortable calling myself an author. And again, it's not that I'm worried about being judged by anyone else. It's just it was like a self confidence issue for me. So, because to compare myself to other people who are authors, like, Stephen King or M.R. Carey or all kinds of, amazing authors out there, it's daunting as someone who is like, I'm a mom from San Clemente, California. No one knows me. So it's tough to take on that title. But I would say, and it's a debate too, because people are like, oh, indie versus traditional publishing. They're all equally respectable in my mind.
Yes.
Because indie publishers, self-publishers, my God, you have to do so much more to get out the gate. And I'm traditionally published, but I'm with a small independent publisher. I do just as much marketing as an indie person because I'm small and unknown. And we're all in the same thing. So to me, I feel that everyone is on the same level, on the same page. But I think a lot of times it's just a confidence issue where you don't feel personally that you can call yourself an author when you haven't been published yet. But I would say everyone is an author whether you've finished or whether you're currently writing something. I think that you have a story to tell and you want to put it out there. I think that makes you an author of that story.
Absolutely, 100%. And as being an indie author, I 100% agree that both are very reputable and very respectful, and it's not easy. It is not easy whatsoever. The grind and the hustle is real. I've been doing this for 5 years now, got 4 books under my name, which has not been easy. And I'm currently writing and finishing up book 5, and also planning out and finishing up the first draft of book 6. And I also have 7 and 8, which are short stories, short little anthologies. But you're absolutely right. It is very interesting. And, everything that we're going to be talking about even more is going to be very, very true. So now let's talk some of questions that are more so about, the reflective aspect of being an author. So we'll start with some icebreaker questions for this segment of the interview. Now, going back again to the beginning of when you're writing the first book and getting that ready to be agented, queried, and getting it published. Everything you said about, that self-confidence, are people going to know me? that is all valid and true. And I definitely think one thing or two things that not a lot of people talk about as much or isn't talked about, especially in the creative publishing world or in the creative world in general, is writer's block and imposter syndrome. Writer's block is always going to be there for anyone who's creative, who's trying to create something. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I'm sure you've been on a lot of sets and heard stories from a lot of producers, or maybe you've heard on the grapevine of probably even the screenplay writers struggling or scenes not going according to plan, trying to recut or reshoot, what have you, the works. And then even going forward, imposter syndrome, are people going to take this body of work serious? Are people going to give me the time of day to read my story, even if it may not be their cup of tea? At least find some interest in the story and leave some reviews for me to build up and work on. So for you, Michele, how did you deal with those two aspects in the early stages of your author career?
Well, I think one of the most dangerous things for an author, I know me especially, is that because it's a double-edged sword. You've got to be out there to promote, right? So you've got to be on Instagram, you've got to be on Facebook, TikTok, all these things to promote yourself, right? Going to festivals or whatever, you're putting yourself out there, right? But when you're out there, you don't have blinders on. You're seeing what everyone else is doing. And it's like, oh my God, they've written 10 books. They wrote 3 books last year. It's the comparison. You see that number on Goodreads or Amazon or whatever, what the reviews are, you see your ranking, and it's that whole comparison. And sometimes if I pay too much attention to it, it gets in my head and it really is detrimental to me. And so what I like to do is I just like to really make my world small as far as that goes. And so when I start to feel like, oh my God, all 3 books were a fluke. My 4th and 5th book aren't going to sell. Like when I start to, and I'm just starting to research a new project right now, and it's a different format, and it's freaking me out. I have to take a deep breath and remember, it's not a fluke. What I'm doing, each project is new. So like I spent like probably 5 years writing the Rise and Fall of DANI TRUEHART series. I like knew those characters like the back of my hand. Book 3 pretty much wrote itself by that point. And then same with my second series, I'd based it on a TV pitch I'd done years ago. So I was very familiar with those characters, right? So this project I'm writing, whole new project. It's just something new. It doesn't mean I can't write. It doesn't mean I can't. So I have to take it down a notch and really like drown out the noise and the doubts, because that's just going to keep me from writing. So I really try to not focus on it. And I focus on my own goals. I wanted to be a published writer. You know what? I am. I never thought I'd win awards. I am. I never thought I'd be a bestseller. I am. So it is, I have to like just stop like looking for, well, what have you done today? What have you done recently? You have to really just like decide what your definition of success is and really stick to it and give yourself some grace, because everyone else, we're all doing the same thing. And if someone else is having awards or they have a great book that's hit the USA Today list, they're not taking away from my success. So so I can't compare myself to them because they're on a different journey than I am. And as far as the writer's block goes, for me, I've discovered, because I always worried a lot about writer's block, but now I figured out that my writer's block comes from when I am scared, or I've made choices in my manuscript that don't ring true to the character or to the plot. And because I had like on I wrote the first draft for my 5th book, and I was stuck in a rut, and I realized after a couple of days, and I still write every single day, whether I have writer's block or not. It might be total like 3 paragraphs, total crap for after 6 hours of work, but I stick to my computer for my allotted time and I write. And I realized that my main character had not decided how they felt on a very key topic. Because in the first book, they decided, and it was a whole thing, but the second book is a continuation of the first book, and they can no longer rely on, I just discovered. They are actively knowing the situation. And so they have to commit either way. And that was something that I hadn't done in my head as a writer. And so I find that 9 times out of 10, if I'm having trouble, I'll go back a couple chapters and I'll usually find where it doesn't ring true. And I'll like, copy and paste it. So I have it just in case, and I'll delete everything and I'll start from scratch. And 9 times out of 10, I'm able to start rolling once I realize that I made the wrong choice, and I have to like let the characters do what they want, not me have them do what I want them to do.
Well said again, Michelle. Well said again. And now I'd actually dive deep into what you talked about earlier about social media, because I think social media is a very important focal point, especially for authors. You're absolutely right. Social media is a big tool for authors to use to promote and to showcase their work. But I'm sure you'll definitely agree it's a double-edged sword. It's emotionally draining. It's, leaves ourselves exposed to a lot of the negative sides of social media. And while, as I said before, it is a great tool for networking and connecting, unfortunately, social media, especially now, can be, what's the word I'm thinking of? It cannot be a great place for a lot of creatives. It's very, very, sometimes very antagonizing.
Yes.
And we definitely see the rise of AI, generative AI, in use of marketing, which we'll be touching on a little bit later. But looking at social media as a whole, it's insane how much it has changed the publishing world. I'm sure you'll definitely agree, working in film and television, 20 something years ago, I mean, social media was not as huge in terms of like, promoting, a new movie or a new series coming up. That was always on, TV. I mean, social media and the internet was there, but still in like its infancy. Now almost every a studio, every production company has an online presence to promote their work, because that's where they get the most engagement. And while that is true, it can be a lot. It's a lot of posting, trying to stay up to date. What does the algorithm want? It's all that research, and it can be overwhelming at some times. With that said, what has disciplined you, Michelle, to stay true to yourself and your values as an author and as a person, to not get swallowed up by just the loud noise of social media?
Well, one of the things that keeps me anchored is I have a son, I have a husband, I have a family, and I don't ever want to do or say on social media and in life anything to, cause them pain, to embarrass them. I don't want my son going to high school and being mortified that his mom did something. So that I always am not just an author, but I'm also a mom and a wife and a sister and all of those things that I am. So that does keep me from chasing, like trends or anything else like that too. I found also too, when I first started out, that social media, I felt the pressure to post and to comment, and it was so much that it was eating into my writing. I was like, I have to stop, because I'm not here to post. If I don't write, I have nothing to post. So I do try to limit my engagement time throughout the day. I'll do 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here. I'm not doom scrolling for hours. I also only follow my hashtags that relate to my writing. I very rarely post anything. You'll never see really pictures of my son out there or my husband. I keep everything focused on my work. And I follow like the Bookstagram and the reading and all the author life and writing, all those hashtags. And for me, that actually keeps my social media feed very, very positive. I very rarely have political things. I very rarely have a lot of negative things. And it allows me to meet authors from around the world who write different genres, who do different things. And I try to promote authors just as much as I hope that they promote me. And it's really worked out, because I post about their book and my stories are reels. And then they will in turn, like in Australia, then they're posting about my book, which only helps get me into a library of myself. So I feel like it's been a really positive, uplifting community. I knock on wood, so far I have not had too many trolls or anything like that, but they are out there. And it's hard, because it's hard to exist when someone's soul, they receive joy out of like taking you down or giving you like bombing your book, your Goodreads with like 0-star reviews. It's tough. You really have to take it with a grain of salt. But I do try to keep it in a small portion, but yet still I have to do reels about my books all the time. So posting reviews and things like that, and just try to do giveaways just to try to keep the interest going.
Yes, very, very true. And now let's talk about something which is now impacting not just the publishing industry, but also the creative industry as well in film and media. And that is, of course, the rise of AI. Now, for this question, I'm going to give some context to this. So as I said, kind of a little off camera, I've been doing this show for about 7 years or so. And I've been an author for about 5 of those years. And when I began this journey back in 2020, I did it as a way to escape, what was happening and not to be bored. And I've loved it ever since. I've got a chance to meet so many new people, so many fellow creatives, a lot of indie authors, hybrid authors, small press, traditional. It's been an amazing experience. I've been able to network with so many people. I have my own team. Some have become my artists, some have become my editors, some people become my devoted beta and ARC readers. It's amazing. And for a long time, I believe that because of the lockdown and everything, it was able to create a golden age of creatives. And I believe that for a very long time. But with the rise of AI and how generative AI is kind of pushing its way in, and companies are becoming more acceptable to the use of generative AI, I've now begun seeing a shift from a golden age to an iron age, in the sense of you are seeing people who are truly passionate about the industry and want to put human voices first, whether that's, narration or written work, and those that are trying to make a quick buck. I don't know if you may have seen this, but there was something on the news very recently of an individual who stated that she used an AI program software to publish over 200 books, which
I
is
read that article. Yeah.
which is first off impossible to do. It's not going to be the best work, but the fact that companies and publishing houses accepted those works leaves a lot to be desired.
100%.
So ultimately, Michelle, my question to you is this. Do you still believe that we are in a golden age still of creatives, or have we transitioned into an iron age? And if we have transitioned into an iron age, do you believe that we are teetering between a downfall into AI creating technologically driven content, pushing human voices aside, or if using AI, because AI is going to be in everything we do, we can't stop it, but if we use it correctly as a tool to help with marketing and stuff and not generate, then if used correctly, we could see the next rise of, amazing talents emerge in the industry.
Okay, I am very, very passionate about this subject. And as someone who's had their second book stolen and fed into the whole Meta stole it, defeated to the whole llama programming when they were training, I am so passionate against AI, even for marketing. I know that a lot of people will use AI to do like maybe their Amazon ads or whatever, and it helps generate them more money. And I get that. And for someone who hasn't had their book stolen, I can see how you could do that. But for me, even just giving a little bit, I don't even like to use the text predictor on my phone at this point. So I very am passionate about it. I'm a member of the Authors Guild, and they generate these human generated books badges or human written book badges to distinguish books that are written by humans, which is really, really stupid if you think about it, because we're at the point where we have to literally distinguish, I'm a human and I wrote a book. Like if you just look at it like just subjectively, that's the stupidest thing ever. But we have to do it because there are people like this woman who is just, she's not to me an author. She's feeding ideas into a generator and then she's printing it out. And yeah, I'm sure she reads it and edits it. But to me, that's not an author. She's more of a data processor or a computer programmer or something like that. She's not writing, because to me, when it's all about the human experience. And so an AI generated book or even AI generated text for an ad or whatnot, it's lacking that human intelligence, that human compassion, that human connection, that to me is why I read in the first place. So I would hope that we don't kind of do like a slide into the deep, dark, futuristic times where everything is, Android and computer generated and it lacks a soul. Right now, you listen to like an AI generated song. Okay, it sounds okay, But if all you hear all day is computer generated songs, I think you're going to be missing that soul component. Maybe sometimes, you hear a breath when someone's singing, or you hear like they hit a wrong note or their little reverb. That's what makes a song like, that's so good, And that's what I think we're going to be missing in if the computers take over entirely. And hopefully the humans fight back and don't allow their voices and images and their work to be fed into these generative AI machines and programs so they can just be chopped up and reproduced ad infinitum. So I'm hopeful that we're not going to do that slide into like the dark ages, but it really just depends on how the governments around the world protect people's rights and really push back against the companies that are offering this cheaper, easier way to live life. Because at the end of the day, being a human is hard. We have to fight. We have to struggle. That's what makes everything worthwhile.
Yes. And one comment, or not one comment, but one quote that I've been seeing and I love talking about on the show is that people who use AI, the major companies who use it, steal from the creative to become wealthy so that the creatives can never be wealthy themselves.
Absolutely.
I 100% correct.
Yeah, I do. And again, it's very easy because look, no one knows who I am. I watched that database that, the Atlantic had put together. I watched that for, I think it was 2 years. And I just checked every month. And then you could have knocked me over with a feather when I saw that my second book had been stolen. And I was like, because they were stealing like Stephen King's and J.K. Rowling's, all the famous people and all the nonfiction people whose names that I can't even know. But they were stealing all these books. And I was like, well, for sure, they're never going to steal mine because I'm just a really small time writer. And then they stole my second book, not my first and third, but my second book. And then, they're saying, because they are now looking for anyone, just people who write. They want to learn how to write emotion. They want to learn how to write human relationships. That's why they're stealing our work. So now I don't send out ebooks anymore for reviews. I won't, I only will send out physical copies of books anymore. And that hurts me when I'm doing a book tour for a new book, because it's really hard to, it's expensive if you're sending books all over Europe. But that's how I have to protect myself, because all of my books have been pirated within 2 days of being published. That's not cool. And so it's also on the reviewers and the readers who I'm trusting to send a book out to, because my book's not on my website. And at the time, they might be able to data scrape now from Kindle. I think they can do that. But at the time, they weren't able to data scrape from Kindle or buy a book and then put it, upload it into an AI generative program. But now they can. So Amazon, Kindle, all these people, the companies need to protect the authors as well. And I don't know what's going to happen.
Again, very, very true, Michelle. And that kind of goes now into my favorite segment, which is the business side of being an author. Now, as an icebreaker question for this segment, when you were working with your agent in terms of marketing, what really surprised you about that aspect of the industry? And looking back, is there anything you guys would have done differently in terms of promoting this series?
I think what surprised me, I grew up watching movies like Romancing the Stone, which the Kathleen Turner character, she gets her big bonus and she's all excited finishing her book, and the agent, I thought that it was like that, big bonus, marketing all over the posters, everything. No, everything is on, even if with an agent, unless I'm some super big name with some super big book that they're going to expect to earn, millions of dollars off of, which I hope to one day be that person. But right now I have yet to be that person. A lot of it still falls on the author. So I think I wish I had known now. I wish I knew then what I knew now. And that was just earned by experience. Putting myself out there into contests. I would have done that earlier to get the award thing rolling. Signing up for, you can apply to the Tucson book festivals all across the country. You can apply to. Some have awards. Some just allow authors to, they pick and choose about who can show up. That's a great way to network, meet people, and also just for posting. Because when people see that you're at something like the Tucson or the LA Book Festival, they're like, oh, they must be legitimate. And then also every time I hear my book's in a library, I try to get somebody to send me a picture, or I make a post about it, because that and lends legitimacy to you as well. And I think what we fight for as lesser known writers is just getting a chance to be in the shadow of the spotlight, because there are tens of thousands of books published a day, right, around the world. So we have to fight to be seen. And I think it's being taken because a lot of people will be like, well, did you just print it, at your home and you're selling it? No, I've done the work. I have an editor. I have whatever. We all have editor books. We all have artwork. We all are legitimate, but it's getting the average purchaser of books to see that we're worth that, either if it's 99 cents on Kindle or if it's like $10.99 or $20, whatever it is, that we're worth that money. Our story is. And then it's that getting them to then take the time to write a review. Because I have sold, like over 1,000 books, but yet my reviews are like maybe 150. And it's getting those people to, if I had thousands of reviews, then that would lend me legitimacy. So I think that's the hardest thing too, is turning those sales into reviews.
Yeah.
And if anyone has a formula for that, I am all ears, because I think I've done very well for myself, but still it is like pulling teeth.
It is. And I think that also when we talk about marketing, that also stems from, do we know our audience, like who our audience is? Because, as authors, we are the target audience first and foremost. We know the book better than anyone else. But when it comes to marketing, remember what you said about what your agent actually do is to remove some of the backstory of the adult characters, because, as they said, the reader is going to be interested in the protagonist, the main character.
Yeah.
They're not want to know a lot about the adults, but you were able to keep, some inklings of Danny's mom's backstory in there just enough, without revealing too much, to give the reader an idea of who she is. And that comes with a lot of, trial and error of like, is this going to work? Is this a nice, healthy balance? And what I think is very important to talk about, which doesn't get a lot of recognition, is in the industry, because of social media, and I think it's tied to this, readers have an expectation of how certain books are supposed to go. And as authors, we want to showcase who we are, our authenticity and individuality. But we don't want to write something that's too original, that's going to be virtually unknown to the reader. But we don't want to write a book that's an exact copy word for word to be seen as a knockoff version. It's this healthy balance, this equilibrium. So for you, Michele, how were you able to find your audience while balancing this teeter-totter of individuality with what I will call marketability?
I agree. And it's a very good question. It's a very hard balancing act. And again, and this is all coming from someone who started writing without an outline. So I knew what I wanted to do, but it wasn't until I was in the middle of writing that I started thinking about, well, who's reading this, whatever. My goal was teens. And again, social media was just starting to blow up 15 years ago. And so I wanted to just to be a little bit of a voice of reason to, yes, there's fame, but there's also this other component that goes along with it. You can't say no to this bad stuff if you want the good stuff.
Yes.
And I think what set me apart was that I had worked for so many years in the entertainment business. Now, granted, behind the camera, I was at a desk where I was on set. I was in front of the camera, but a lot of the same experiences and rules still apply. The cutthroatedness, the moral flexibility in order to get what you want, it still is all there, whether you're a producer, a production assistant, or you're a movie star or a singer. So I think that's what sets my books apart, is that I do bring authenticity, not just a little. I bring authenticity because I used to work in that business. And I think I can speak to what happens behind the cameras and how. So I'm hoping my books come across as very realistic, which I have been told that they do, because that was the experience that I had. As when I started out, I was like 21 when I started out. So I really do feel like it's that is what sets my book across. It's not just a supposition or I think this happens. It is. And it's talking about all of this great stuff that we see, like the private jets and like the designer clothes that are sent to your house by the box full. But it's also the pressure to perform and never having privacy, always being judged, and the constant critique from social media, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Very, very true. And I think going back to what you talked about earlier, community is also very important. And that's probably one of the benefits of social media, is that as writers, we're able to connect with not only fellow writers and authors, but also artists, narrators, graphic designers, and build a team of like-minded people, as well as learn from a lot of experienced people as well. And this kind of is a two-part question, Michelle. So, in your opinion, from your own experiences, how important is it for anyone, no matter what industry they're going into, to begin networking very early on? And secondly, who are some of the people you would like to give a personal shout out to who have helped you on your journey?
Okay, so I do think it's funny because before my agent signed me, she's like, I had not, I think, signed on to Facebook. My Instagram was small, and at the time I was on Twitter because that had not changed. Let's just leave it at that. So she said, she's like, you need to be on all these platforms, and she's like, you need to have a strong following. And I was fighting her on Facebook because I didn't want to join Facebook. She's like, look, you either start joining or we're not working together. So I did, and I joined, and I built my platform. Because she's like, publishers are going to want to see, if you're going traditional, what you're bringing to the table, who you selling to, because your platform, your followers are going to help you sell because they're going to be reposting. So I might have let's say Twitter, I'm just under 6,000, not Twitter, on Instagram, just under 6,000 followers right now, which I'm working very hard to build at. But if every one of those people posts, then their followers, so it's like that whole, it's that tree, like a phone tree almost, where it's just you're spreading your message via everyone else's followers. So I think that's why it's so important. I also will say I have met an amazing community of writers, and they help me from everything. I'll ask a question like, has anyone experienced this before? Like whether it's a scam, query that I get in my box and I'm not sure whether it's legitimate or not. Or whether it's like, has anyone gone to this festival, or has anyone tried this with marketing, or, just anything. Even if I'm struggling with something with writing, I'll ask a question. And I never put anything out there that I would be super upset about by getting a negative response. But I have to say, I very rarely, knock on wood, again, have any negative responses with the people that I am dealing with. Because again, I hang out in those hashtag writing, author life, author, bookstagram, all of those writing hashtags. And I think that really kind of narrows my circle down to other like-minded individuals who are all on the same journey. And there's some people who are like best-selling authors that I follow, like New York Times, USA, and they follow me back. And then there's just random people like you and me who have a passion for writing. We're published authors, and we're all just working together trying to help promote each other.
Absolutely, 100%, Michelle. And before we get to the end, I have a last round of fan questions that I like to call the rapid fire round. So let's begin with the first question. Now, as a reader, which do you prefer, themes or tropes in your stories?
Themes.
All right, nice. Next one. Out of the 5 physical senses, in your opinion, as an author, which is the most difficult to emulate?
Smell.
Ooh, I like that. I don't get a lot of smell. Third, most overrated trope in fiction.
Oh, enemies to lovers.
I knew that was going to be it. I knew it was going to be that one. Now, most underrated trope.
Oh God. I guess coming of age.
Ooh, okay. Now, these next sets of questions I think are very perfect, not only for this book, but also for your background as well. First question. If there was an original song for either the entire series or for each book, what would those songs be? And it could be songs from that exist in real life or a song that is already sung in the books. What would those be?
I want to say "Don't Stop Me Now" by Queen. That's a good one. And then "Applause" by Lady Gaga. That's for the series in general. A lot of Lady Gaga songs really fit my my Dani TRUEHART world.
All right. Now, this one is a two-parter because it's going to change depending on the first answer. Now, if you had unlimited funds, unlimited money, would you rather have your trilogy be adapted into an audiobook or be adapted into a limited series?
Limited series.
All right. Now, from that answer, for let's say Dani TRUEHART, her mother, father, agent, and guardian, if you again had unlimited funds, who would you want, or who would you want to cast in each of those roles?
Okay, this is awful because I'm so horrible with names, but I think like either Reese Witherspoon or Elizabeth Banks as Jodie. Um, I'm trying to think of her name. I'll skip that one. So Billy Porter as Martin.
Ooh, good choice.
Yeah, and then so for and I can't think of his name, but he looks like I think Michael Chiklis, but he's a bald guy. He's had a lot of FX series, and he is perfect. And I totally am blanking on his name. And then for Danny, back when I done the series, I thought Haley Steinfeld, because she can sing and she just looks like the part to me, but she's a little bit older now, but someone like her. That's yeah.
Ooh, nice. I like that. I like that. All right. Here we go. This one's probably a very tough one. Which is more difficult for an author to experience? Knowing when to say to stop writing, or realizing the story is finished?
I think realizing when the story is finished.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. That's a really good one. Now, I know, as you mentioned before, there's a lot of good scenes, a lot of conflict between Dani and especially her mother, especially in book 2. As an author, how do you like to introduce conflict into a scene? And how do you balance the conflict with the emotional themes or undertones of the characters?
I like to introduce conflict. I'm trying to think back to the books I'm doing. I like to introduce conflict as just not even, it's all very understated. And because oftentimes it can start as just a little something, a spark, and then there are all these underlying emotions. It's never just one thing. So I like a conflict to usually start with something very, very small that might not be related, and then it just kind of blows up to the kernel, the nucleus of the argument is actually something that's been brewing for a really, really long time. And then the genesis was something that was, small, but the major conflict is something that the characters have been avoiding to talk about for quite some time. And a lot of times I feel that things in life spark up because of someone, left the milk out on the counter, and all of a sudden you're fighting about you never support my writing career, or whatever the case may be. You know what I'm saying? And that's not the case at all. My husband is a great supporter, but I'm just saying a lot of times it's those tiny things that spark an argument, and then it leads to a much deeper topic that people have been avoiding. So that's how I like to introduce it, is usually by something small or insubstantial.
Nice. Very, very nice. Now, before I get to the final question of this amazing interview, I did have one final rapid fire question. I've been going through the list on my phone of questions that I have not asked guests. And, ooh, okay. This one I'm actually going to combine with several questions.
Okay.
So, here is the final rapid fire question, Michele. Which do you think is more dangerous for an author? Writing solely for the motivation of validation, or writing solely to make a quick buck and trying to be an overnight success?
I think the second one. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because with this series, my last 2 books, I had very definite opinions from my readers about what they wanted. And it got in my head a little bit, and it made me confused about what I want to do. And the reality of it was I had to stick to the story and be true to what the characters wanted. And as much as I would love to sell, a crowd popular best-selling novel, I do feel like if you're going to sell something that's going to have legs and stand the test of time, you have to have good writing in there. And that comes from character-driven, for me, character-driven, and then plot a little bit, but really character-driven stories are what drives me to write. And so if I'm creating characters to please a mass audience, they're going to have thousands of opinions. Not everyone's going to like it. So it's easier to me to be clear when I have one focus, and that's really what my focus is for the character's journey.
Nice. Very, very nice, Michele. And now we arrive at the final question of this amazing author interview. Now, I talked about a lot of things in this interview, which I am so happy for. And I think a lot of viewers are going to take a lot of great things from our discussion. At the end of the day, Michele, at the end of the day, what do you want readers and fellow authors to take away from your series, The Rise and Fall of Dani TRUEHART?
I would like readers to that's a good question. I would like them to be connected to the story and see that it's not all glamour and that there's a lot of hard choices, and that I really just would like them to have compassion for people who are in the spotlight and working behind the scenes as well, because it is such a harrowing field to be in. I mean, they're not saving lives, but they are putting themselves out there, putting everything out in the public, and people feel entitled when they see a celebrity to every bit of their lives and not giving them that privacy. So I hope through my story, readers can connect with the idea of being a celebrity and having some privacy. And they make mistakes like everyone else, and be a little bit, maybe take away from the story that they're a little bit just judgmental about people, a little less judgmental about people who are in the spotlight. You know, when you read a gossip magazine, it's so easy to judge celebrities. But the reality of it is it's just one, snapshot of their life, and you don't have the whole context. So I really think that offering people in the public eye in general a little bit of grace and a little bit of understanding, that would be something that I would love readers to take away from my series.
Beautifully said, Michele. And a perfect ending to this incredible author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to Michele for coming on the show, making her official debut, and hopefully not the last time we see her on the channel. Now, Michele, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out, as well as purchase a copy of your books? And will you be doing any in-person events at any festivals, conferences, signings, anything that people can look forward to for either this year or 2027?
So you can find my books anywhere you get great books. I'm sold all over the place online: Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, what have you. I'm in a ton of local libraries across the country as well as in England. So, and if I'm not there, just request my books from your librarian and they'll order the whole set. So that would be great. I have a website, www.michelekwasniewski.com, KWASNIEWSKI. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok with @author.michele_Kwas, KWAS. And then I will be at the LA Book Festival this year on April 18th from 12 to 2 in booth 153, the Black Chateau booth. So come on by. I'm giving away free little bookish things, and I'm doing book signings.
Awesome. I will link all that down below in the description of this video. And also, viewers and listeners, if you haven't seen my previous episodes, I too will be at the LA Festival of Books on Saturday as well at booth 128. I'll be signing from 10 to 12:30 and 3 to 5:30. So I'll be there for almost the entire day. So if you like to see me and Michele in person and get a copy of our books, make sure to find us at our booths. And we're also going to be posting all of that when it gets closer to the date. And in fact, it's like what, less than 50 days from now, give or take?
Yeah, we're getting close.
Yeah, it's going to be insane. So if you want to stay up to date with all information, make sure to follow us on our socials. I'll be attaching Michele's down below in the description of this video. And you can follow me on my platforms on Instagram, LinkedIn, my website, and more. And as always, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for another amazing episode. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with all new information. And if you'd like to see Michele back on the show in a follow-up episode, let me know and I will make it happen. And until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out. Wish you all a wonderful afternoon wherever you are in the world. Have a wonderful Tuesday, everybody, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Take care and have a wonderful day.